This conference will now be recorded.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Casey Conlin. I'm the Library Sustainability Coordinator at the Mid-Hudson Library System, and I wanted to welcome you all to our Libraries Addressing Food Scarcity with Hunger Solutions webinar workshop today. Just a little bit of housekeeping. We're going to try to keep everybody on mute. If you're not talking, I'm going to mute myself too, just to cut down on any noise that you might not even know is happening out there, and just to make a better experience for everybody. But we do want to hear from you and we do want you to participate. So if you do have a question while the webinar is going on, please pop it into the chat box and we'll try to find a break or an opportunity to actually talk about that. If there's no opportunity to address your question as we go through the presentation, we have time built in at the end to answer questions. And at the end time too, because we don't have too big of a group, for sure we can do some unmuting and you can ask your questions without having to type them all out, because I wonder if sometimes that's an impediment to us asking our questions. So I'm excited about this webinar today, and I'm really excited that Krista and Dee Dee are able to join us, because we have a lot of people who are experiencing hunger in our communities right now as a result of COVID-19, and even as we start to recover from the pandemic, there's still a lot of hunger out there. We've seen a lot of libraries actually work to address hunger in their communities, and we even had a webinar back in the fall as part of our Reimagining Library Services series, where we talked to 5 different libraries about ways that they found to address hunger and food scarcity in their communities. So the idea with this webinar and that last one is to actually inspire you and your folks at your libraries, and to give you the tools that you need to actually help alleviate some of the hunger that the people in your community are experiencing. So I'm really happy to actually have an expert today. We have Krista Hersdorfer, and she is the Child Nutrition Program Specialist at Hunger Solutions New York. And she's actually going to talk to us about some of the resources that are out there for individuals, and even some of the things that organizations can do to try to address hunger in their community. We're also going to hear from Dee Dee Farabah, who is joining us today, and she is the director at the Putnam Valley Library, which is in Putnam County. And so she's going to talk to us about some of the stuff that she has worked with that Krista is going to talk about, and some of the other things that she has done to try to alleviate the hunger in her community. So I'm going to turn it over to Krista now, and I'm going to say thank you very much, Krista, and welcome to the Mid-Hudson Library System. And thanks very much for sharing with us today.
Well, thank you, Casey, and thank you to everybody on the line for taking the time today. As Casey said, anti-hunger work is nothing new for libraries. We've been working with libraries for years now, especially on summer meals, but sort of the whole suite of federal nutrition assistance programs. And y'all just seem to get it, and you're enthusiastic and committed, and I can't thank you for that enough. Especially with everything that has come our way in the past year. Libraries have continued to really rise to the moment. So I appreciate you taking the time to be here. I hope that in the next hour or so, we can provide some additional resources and ideas to support you in that work. So in our time today, I'm going to start off by sharing some of the latest findings around food insecurity amid COVID-19, sort of a status check, if you will, on what's happening in New York, especially among households with children. And then I'm going to walk through the federal nutrition assistance programs to give you maybe like a Reader's Digest version of the program, what's happening with it, where are there opportunities for growth, and how can libraries get involved with that. Then we're going to hear, as Casey said, from Dee Dee about the great work that they're doing in Putnam Valley. And then I understand we'll have plenty of time for Q&A and discussion, which is great. But as Casey said, please don't hesitate to put questions in the chat box. I'll try to keep an eye out. I know Casey is kindly monitoring as well. And Casey, don't hesitate to interrupt me at any point. I want to be as informative as possible. But before I go further, I should introduce my organization. Hunger Solutions New York is a statewide nonprofit anti-hunger organization. We work to support the federal nutrition assistance programs. So that includes SNAP, WIC, school meals, summer meals, after school and childcare meals, and now this new Pandemic-EBT program that I'll tell you a little bit about as well. So our work includes statewide outreach to raise awareness of the programs, increase support for the programs. We also provide technical assistance to help schools and community-based organizations tap into these programs. And we do a lot of administrative and legislative advocacy to protect and strengthen the programs. And we do this work because a lot of New Yorkers are unfortunately struggling with food insecurity. I wanted to give you a glimpse at some measures of hunger from even before the pandemic. If any of you have seen any of the presentations my organization has offered in the past, this chart might look familiar to you. These are three of the most common ways of measuring hunger in our state and in our nation. So on the left-hand side, you can see the USDA's food insecurity metric from their annual household food security report. In the middle, we're looking at food hardship data from the Food Research and Action Center. Those numbers are specific to New York. And on the right-hand side is some data from Feeding America, their Map the Meal Gap food insecurity report, again for New York specifically. And across all of the measures, the blue bar represents the rate of food insecurity or food hardship among all households, and the orange bar is specifically households with children. You can see that even before COVID-19, about 1 in 10, or at least 1 in 10 households were coping with food insecurity, and about 1 in 6 of our households with children. And unfortunately, as I'm sure many of you are seeing in your communities, the need has grown substantially during the pandemic. So in that previous slide, I had shown that Feeding America had a rate of 11.1% for food insecurity among all households. They're projecting that to rise to 16%, which represents an increase of almost 1 million New Yorkers who will be newly food insecure amid COVID-19. They're also projecting that the food insecurity rate among households with children will reach almost 27%. And this mirrors what we see nationally as well, which is that unfortunately the rate of food scarcity is higher than we've seen it in recent memory, including at the height of the Great Recession in 2008. So this chart is showing an even more severe measure of food hardship. This is a census pulse survey question asking respondents if they sometimes or often did not have enough to eat over the last 7 days. And so you can see that the percentage of respondents who answered affirmatively to that is higher now than it has been even during the recession, and that green line representing respondents in households with children continues to be higher than households overall. It's also important to acknowledge that food insecurity is a racial equity issue and that it's disproportionately affecting communities of color. This has always been true, and it continues to be true as COVID-19 has disproportionately affected households of color in a variety of ways when it comes to the health and economic impacts of the pandemic. And so you can see that looking at that census question, Black and Latinx households were far more likely to report that they sometimes or often did not have enough to eat compared to white households or households of other races. And I don't think that I need to convince anybody that food insecurity is bad, but sometimes it's good to be armed with the research. And so on this slide and on the next slide, which I'll be sharing, by the way, I'll share the slide deck so you have access to all the links and resources. I wanted to just share some of the major findings on the associations between food insecurity and health and academic outcomes. There might be a chance that you all need to convince other people in your community or in your work of why it is so urgent and important for libraries to be involved. And so I wanted you to have access to these research briefs that I have linked at the bottom of each of these slides. So know that among adults, food insecurity is associated with an increased risk of a whole range of chronic diseases, including things like heart disease and cancer. And among children, food insecurity is associated with a range of negative health and academic outcomes, including things that we all really care about when it comes to literacy and learning and development, right? So food insecurity is associated with developmental risk, especially for infants and toddlers. It's also associated with a greater risk of developing mental health problems like depression and anxiety. Kids tend to have trouble staying focused and engaged, unsurprisingly, when they're struggling with food insecurity. They're more likely to be tardy or absent from school, and they're more likely to exhibit some behavioral challenges. So what can we do about it? There are a lot of different ways to get involved in anti-hunger work. And I think sometimes we visualize more like food pantry, soup kitchen type projects. And so I wanted to take a second to talk about why our focus is on federal nutrition programs specifically, not at all in any way to devalue other things that are happening, which are important and fill gaps that sometimes the federal nutrition programs can't fill. But just to give you some perspective on why we focus our work on the programs that we do. So first of all, the federal nutrition assistance programs are proven to reduce food insecurity, and they're proven to have positive impacts on those health and academic factors that I just discussed. They're also substantially more sustainable sources of funding than most sort of local level donation-based projects. And so a figure that Feeding America puts out is that for every one meal that a food bank provides, SNAP provides 9. And again, that's not to devalue food banks. They're the ones who produce the number because they're next to us advocating for these federal nutrition programs. Food banks and food pantries have continued to struggle to meet the demand. And so their perspective and our perspective is let's maximize these federal nutrition assistance programs. And that way the emergency food sector and the charitable food sector is filling in the gaps rather than struggling to meet that full demand. The programs are also responsive. So this has to do with how federal nutrition programs are structured. Almost all of them are entitlement programs, meaning that anybody who meets the qualifications will receive the benefit. It's not like it's a limited pot of money where we can only serve so many people with SNAP. And so as the economy changes and more people become eligible for SNAP, we can catch them in that net. We can serve those families. And so SNAP expands when the economy suffers, and then it contracts when the economy recovers. So it's a really valuable thing that I don't think we think about a lot, but it allows SNAP to be responsive. It doesn't require additional allocations in order to meet the increased need. And finally, the federal nutrition programs bring federal dollars back into our communities. And that's what we need, right? So for every $1 in SNAP benefits, there's economic growth of about $1.50 as that makes its way through a local economic system. And so what a marketing point that can be, right, for our local businesses and retailers that let's draw down some federal funding and bring that back into our communities. So there's a whole lot of benefits to maximizing the federal programs that we have available to us. But unfortunately, all of them remain undertapped in our state and across the country. So that's why we're here today, I think, is just to figure out how we can solve that problem, right? And there's a few buckets, I think, of things that we can do to help maximize the programs. One is just sharing information with families. This is not a groundbreaking strategy. This is what you all do and do so well. But I'll be talking about some different ways that you can share information about SNAP, WIC, Pandemic-EBT, and summer meals. Because libraries are trusted messengers, that's really, I can't overstate the value of just sharing information about the programs and making sure that folks know what's available to them. The other piece is making those community connections and maybe pushing to encourage some schools and community-based organizations in your area to tap into the programs that are available to them to feed kids. That might also look like your library serving summer or after school meals if that's something that you have capacity to do, and then we'll talk about that. And finally, I'm not sure if or how much you all are able to advocate, but I would be remiss if I didn't say that advocacy is a big part of our work. And so I'll just share at the end a link to where you can find more information about some of the upcoming opportunities for federal legislation that could really substantially change these programs and benefit more kids and families. So as I promised earlier, I'm going to walk through each of the major federal nutrition assistance programs and really focus in on where there's opportunities for growth and how libraries can get involved. I'm going to start with summer meals because this is an area where there's been tremendous growth among libraries in the past several years. In 2014, we had about 36 libraries operating as summer meal sites across the state. In 2019, just 5 years later, we had almost 130. So it's been incredible to watch as libraries have just run with this program in the very best way. Even during the pandemic last year, when a lot of libraries had to close their doors, we still had about 30 across the state who were able to participate in summer meals, serving grab and go meals or partnering with their school districts. So now is the time to be thinking about summer meals for this coming summer. I'm sure you're all familiar with that concept as you think about your summer reading program. So I wanted to walk through, just in case you're not familiar, what this program is and what are some of the eligibility considerations that you might want to keep in mind. So when I talk about summer meals, I'm talking about the summer food service program. It's just that the summer food service program is not a fun thing to say. And so just know that we're talking about this federal program. And the way that it works is local sponsors and sites like schools, libraries, parks, housing communities, all sorts of different organizations can serve free meals to all kids and teens age 18 and under. There's no application for families or for kids. There's no enrollment process. Any child can drop by and get a meal. In a normal year, kids have to sit and eat their meal at a site in a congregate setting. That was waived in 2020, so libraries were able to do grab and go meals and allow for that social distancing. Also in a normal year, the program is only available in eligible low-income areas. That was also waived in 2020, which meant that we saw summer meal sites able to pop up across the state. The waivers that were in place last summer may be extended this year, but that hasn't happened yet. So I would ask for a little bit of grace. I'm going to try to walk a line of giving you some information that will be helpful if the waivers aren't extended, while reserving the right to email you a week from now and tell you to ignore what I just told you. But we're really hopeful that those waivers will be in place for the coming summer so that there's more flexibility to allow summer meal sites across the state for sure. So to give you a sense of how the summer meals program operates in New York State in a normal summer and where there's some room for growth, we had 380 sponsoring organizations in 2019. These are primarily school districts, food banks, larger community-based organizations that handle the administrative burden of operating the program at the local level. And then the sites where kids actually sit and eat, like a library, we had nearly 3,000 of those across the state in 2019, which is fantastic. But still, for every 100 kids who ate free or reduced price lunch at school, we only reached about 25 of them in the summer. So about 1 in 4 of our state's low-income kids had access to a summer lunch. And that's actually the best participation number I can pull. If I look at breakfast instead of lunch, or if I look at August instead of July, we're reaching even fewer kids. So those are statewide numbers. If you're interested in seeing some figures for your county, we produce a summer food service program status report that has county by county information on the number of sites and sponsors and that participation gap. How many of the low-income kids in your community have access to summer meals in a normal summer? But clearly there's a lot of opportunity for growth in the summer meals program. And so I want to encourage you to get involved in whatever way you can. I'm going to share some information about becoming a summer meal site, but we know that that's not always feasible and that that's not the only meaningful way to get involved with this program. It's also extremely important just to share information with families. Make sure that they know where there are sites that are operating in their area. So each summer we populate our website, summermealsny.org, with the site information across the state and a USDA mapper that folks can use to find their local sites. You can also get site information from your local schools or sponsoring organizations. You might even be able to get that before I get my list, right? And just make those local level connections. And then we have a whole bunch of outreach resources that you can use. They're all available on summermealsny.org. We have flyers and rack cards in English and Spanish. We have social media posts, and we have these little graphics like the one on the bottom left-hand side of the slide that you can add to your website or e-newsletter, social media, what have you. Go ahead and link that to summermealsny.org, and families can really easily click over and find the sites that are operating near them. And I hope that you will feel encouraged to share these resources with others as well. There's a whole range of trusted messengers that have opportunities to reach families. And so getting the whole community involved is a really great way to make sure that families know where they can find sites. For those of you who are interested in taking it a step further and maybe serving meals right at your library, wanted to share a little bit of information about that. So also on summermealsny.org, we have the resources that you need to get started if you're interested in being a summer meal site. Typically, the first step in that process is to figure out, am I in an area that's eligible to participate in this program? That, again, was waived last year. We're really hoping that it's going to be waived this year, but I wanted to provide this information so that you're equipped if it's not waived, and in case you're thinking ahead to a future year where we might not have these flexibilities in place. So to determine whether you're in an area that's eligible to participate in the program, you're looking at whether 50% or more of the students in your area qualify for free or reduced price school meals. That can be established through census data, and I'll show you an example of a mapper that you can use for that. Or it can be established through your local school data. That sometimes is the easiest way to go if you know that your local school serves more than 50% for your reduced price eligible students. Once you've established that you're in an eligible location, the next step is to connect with the local sponsor. They're really going to be your best contact for figuring out how this can work for your library and the specifics of what it would look like. Are they able to deliver meals right to your library? What types of record keeping would they like you to do? What kind of training are they going to offer your staff? All of those specifics, your local sponsor is definitely the person to talk to about that. So we try to make it as easy as possible for people to find the local sponsors that are operating near them and to contact them. So we produce a summer meal sponsor directory each year. As you can imagine, things are a little bit delayed this year. And so I just got the contact information a few weeks ago, and I'm working to update it on our website now. But there's not a ton of turnover. So feel free to use the sponsor directory that's up there now. That's based on 2019-2020. You can click on your county and find a list of all the sponsors that are operating and the contact information for the right person to reach out to. You can also reach out to your local school. Many of them that didn't participate in the past did choose to participate in 2020, in some cases because of the waiver of area eligibility. So now they were newly able to offer summer meals. So feel free to reach out to your school district, even if they're not showing up on the sponsor directory. They may have plans to operate this school year, and they're often the very best summer sponsors because they have so much experience feeding kids. And so just to give you an idea of this capacity builder mapper, this is a USDA map that is really useful for a range of reasons. We typically talk about it in terms of determining if you're in an eligible area. So on this slide, I put a screenshot of just bringing up Poughkeepsie, right? And you can add in layers of data on the left-hand side here to show whether you're in an eligible area or not based on census data. So on here, the areas that are shaded in pink are eligible based on the census data. The areas that are in blue are not. And again, there's more that's eligible than what's showing up on this map because you can use your school data too, but this can be a really good starting point. On top of that, you can add in additional information So here I checked the box for 2020 summer meal sites, which are the little black dots that are showing up all over Poughkeepsie there. And then I also clicked the button for library locations. And so the big red dot that you might be able to see in the middle of Poughkeepsie there is their public library. And so this can just be a useful tool to play around with and see, where do we have areas that are eligible to participate in the program, but there weren't sites in previous years. And there happens to be a library there, or there happens to be a school there, or there happens to be a healthcare clinic there, or some other really great opportunity to maybe establish some new sites in areas where there's unmet need. This is a great mapper. I love playing around with it. I hope you will too, but it's not at all user friendly. And so I just want to put it out there that you're more than welcome to reach out. If you do want to dig into some of this local level data and play around with the mapper and you're having trouble getting it to work for you, I'm always happy to walk through it with folks one-on-one. So now, taking a step back to February, which is, unfortunately where we are, we'll talk a little bit about school meals. So there is some good news here that you may know, and that is that almost all of schools across the state are offering free meals to all kids this school year. This is another thing that was enabled through waivers. We love it. We're really glad. However, a lot of schools are struggling with low participation. For the kids that are in school in person right now, that's a captive audience. It's easy to get breakfast and lunch to them. For the kids who are learning remotely, in most cases, a parent has to come and pick up meals. And so that introduces some challenges with stigma, transportation, logistics, and just basic awareness that these meals are available, that they're free, that they're not taking anything away from anybody else. It's a federally funded program. Again, it can expand and contract. And so just getting those messages out to families and encouraging them to participate is really important, not only for the families, but also for the school nutrition programs to keep them sustainable and operating as they should. So we have developed some resources to help schools through this. We have a school meals marketing toolkit with flyers, social media posts, the whole 9 yards. And we also have a school meals resource roundup that I've linked here. That's just a collection of best practices and strategies and things that schools are doing that are really innovative to help address some of those other barriers beyond awareness and make this a little bit easier and maybe less stigmatizing for families. So these are resources primarily for, a school nutrition director to use, but I included them in here because time and time again, I'll be talking to a librarian and they happen to be on the school board or be best friends with the superintendent or something like that, right? And so I don't want to make any assumptions. You all are heavily involved in your communities. Please feel free to either use these resources yourself or to share them with folks that you're connected with. The other thing I'll say about school meals is the importance of SNAP outreach for school meals specifically, and for expanding access to school meals even beyond this school year. So when a family participates in SNAP, the children in that family are automatically certified for free school meals through a process called direct certification. If enough students in a school have that direct certification through SNAP or another means tested program, that can open the door for a school to serve universal free school meals, even in a normal year where we don't have these types of waivers in place. So I know Poughkeepsie does that, Newburgh does that, a whole lot of other schools across the state have been serving universal free school meals for years now. And this is how they had enough students in their school who were automatically certified through programs like SNAP. And so we want to make sure that if there are families who are newly eligible for SNAP, maybe they lost income over the last 10 months, that they know that this is important, that it's available to them, and that it can also be a benefit for the school. And so we've developed a SNAP outreach toolkit for schools, but anybody can use the resources that are in there. We've got flyers for families, social media posts, e-newsletter articles, and again, a little button that you could put on your website if you wanted to make it really easy for folks to click over to the SNAP application. The other thing I have on here is some mentions of school breakfast. In an ordinary year, this is one of our, biggest priorities, is expanding access to breakfast after the bell. Because for every child who eats free or reduced price school lunch, fewer than half are accessing school breakfast for a variety of reasons. Again, logistics, stigma, but serving some alternative models like offering grab and go meals or serving breakfast in the classroom are proven strategies for making sure more kids are eating breakfast. And so we produced a school breakfast report that I've linked here that outlines district level data. How well are your schools doing at reaching kids with breakfast? And then what are some strategies that have been working really well for schools across the state? So I won't get too into the weeds on that sort of thing, but I wanted to make sure that you had those resources. All right, and I mentioned Pandemic-EBT at the beginning. This is a brand new program and a really exciting one. So it's a new crisis response program. It's providing food benefits to kids who qualify for free or reduced price school meals. So in the spring, when schools were closed pretty much across the board for 3.5 months, all families received all eligible families received $420 per child in these food benefits to make up for the disrupted access in school meal programs. The good news is that this program, Pandemic-EBT, has been extended to cover this school year too for students who are learning remotely, either full or part-time. It was also extended to include kids 0 to 5 who were not included in the first round of benefits. We're really excited about that. For those 0 to 5s, it is important to note it's only kids who are participating in SNAP, and there's a whole lot of details that still need to be worked out. But I wanted to give you a heads up that there's going to be another round of Pandemic-EBT benefits coming. Last time we saw that it was really important to have community messengers at all levels, helping families understand what this was, how to use it, why they should use it, and just understand that something's coming in the mail that they shouldn't throw away. Honestly, at the end of the day, it was one of the most important messages to get out there. So state plans are in process now to distribute the benefits for this school year. We'll keep you up to date. But in the meantime, there are some messages to share with families. One thing to know is that everybody who received Pandemic-EBT in the last school year, so in that first round, those folks are going to be carried over unless, like they graduated, they'll be taken off the list. But for the most part, the families who were covered by Pandemic-EBT last school year are going to be covered again. The group that we really need to get at are these newly eligible families who were not qualified for free or reduced price meals last year, but they became eligible this year. Their schools are offering free meals. And so a parent may not be thinking about, oh, I need to fill out an application for free or reduced price school meals. But for Pandemic-EBT, it's really important. So for families who didn't receive benefits through Pandemic-EBT the last school year, but now they're eligible for free or reduced price school meals, we want to encourage those folks to submit an application. We have a simple flyer that folks are welcome to share. I would definitely coordinate with your school district if you're interested in doing some of this outreach. Many schools are on the community eligibility provision, and so things are a little bit different for them. And so we just want to make sure that the messages are lockstep and as helpful for families as possible. But in general, our drumbeat right now is newly eligible families apply for free or reduced price meals, because that can help you get in the door for Pandemic-EBT. The other important message is SNAP, and this is going to come up probably 3 or 4 more times, but sharing information with SNAP is really important right now. Again, it directly certifies kids for free or reduced price school meals, so it's another way to get them into Pandemic-EBT if they're newly eligible. And for those children 0 to 5, the only kids who will receive those benefits are kids who are participating in SNAP. And so for those little ones especially, we want to make sure that all eligible families are participating. So stay tuned for more. We're working on some outreach resources around this, and we'll keep you all up to date. I linked our Pandemic-EBT webpage, and then also the Office of Temporary and Disability Assistance. They're the folks who administer this program in New York State. So they're their website is a really great resource to get lots and lots of information. So moving on to another acronym, the Child and Adult Care Food Program, or CACFP. This program is probably the least well-known of the federal nutrition programs in terms of its name, but it does a tremendous amount to feed kids. It provides funding to child care centers, to home-based daycare providers, and to after-school programs to help them serve healthy meals and snacks to the kids in their care. So sort of like the summer meals program, but for childcare and after-school settings. And again, like the summer food service program and like all the federal nutrition programs, there's a lot of room for growth here. Only about half of New York's child care providers participate in CACFP. And among after-school programs, that number is even lower. So for every 100 kids who eat free or reduced price school lunch in New York State, only about 6 have access to after-school meals. Many programs choose to serve a snack instead of a meal, but even when we count in the snacks, we're not reaching as many kids as we could. And, you know, kids need 3 meals a day, especially if we want them to stay focused and engaged for several hours after the school day ends. So we would really love to see more programs switching from snacks to meals, and programs that aren't offering nutrition at all, maybe thinking about applying for CACFP and getting started. So I'm not going to get into the weeds of eligibility for after-school meals unless people have questions, but I left in the slide because some people are wonky like me and you want to know this information. Basically, many of the same waivers as applied for summer meals are in place for after-school meals. And so there's more opportunities to reach families with grab-and-go meals, and there's more opportunities to offer after-school meals across the state, even in areas that wouldn't ordinarily be able to do so. But the key takeaway here is that there's a whole lot more schools and community-based organizations that are offering after-school programs and aren't serving meals, or they're serving snacks instead of meals. And so if you all have ears that you can get into about this and promote the program and encourage some more folks to get involved, that would be great. We're happy to work with people who are interested in getting started, including if your library might be interested, if you offer after-school programs. Please don't hesitate to get in touch, and I'm more than happy to work with you one-on-one to figure out if this might be something that you can do. Same thing for childcare providers. If you happen to have a line to some childcare providers in your area, maybe they participate in some of your programming for kids, please feel free to share information about CACFP. We have outreach resources in the websites that I've linked on this slide. And moving along, I'm going to wrap things up with some programs that are available for families to participate in directly. So WIC and SNAP. As I'm sure you know, WIC provides healthy food, breastfeeding support, nutrition counseling, and other services for pregnant women, new and breastfeeding moms, and kids under the age of 5. And as with all the programs, there are a whole lot of people who could participate who are not participating. So I'm going to walk through some maps to give you a sense of WIC participation across the state over the past several years. So this is 2014. And green is good. So any counties that are shaded green are reaching 51% or more of their eligible families with WIC. In the yellow counties are reaching 41 to 50%. In the orange counties, it's 31 to 40. And then the red counties, it's less than 30% of eligible families are participating in WIC. So keep an eye on how the colors change. I'm going to just quickly flip through some other maps. So this again is 2014, 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, and 2019. So you can see we've got some work to do across the state to increase participation in WIC. And that's where I hope that you all will be able to help. We're really interested in spreading the word about WIC in general, but especially highlighting some aspects of the program that might not be so well known. One is that if you're familiar with the paper checks that WIC used to use for distributing benefits, those paper checks are a thing of the past. Now WIC benefits are distributed on a card very similar to a debit card. It makes the shopping experience much easier, much less stigmatizing. For example, it used to be the case that families had to buy all of the items on their WIC check at one time, which you can imagine is a logistical barrier for folks who have limited access to transportation. That's no longer the case. On an eWIC card, they can shop how and when it works for them and buy, 1 gallon of milk at a time instead of 4. Again, just a better experience overall. And so we want to get the word out about that if there were folks who were hesitant to participate because of that shopping experience. Another piece that not a lot of folks know is that non-maternal caregivers can apply for WIC on behalf of children under the age of 5 in their care. So this includes dads, grandparents in kinship care situations, foster parents, step parents, other types of non-maternal guardians. So we have a bunch of outreach resources on our WIC Help New York Resource Center, which I have linked here. And we've got some resources that really lift up those pieces of the program that are maybe not so well known, but could help some people feel a little bit more comfortable participating in the WIC program. And finally, just a word about SNAP. This has been a drumbeat throughout the presentation for a reason, and that's because SNAP is our nation's largest anti-hunger program. I also see it as a child nutrition program because it is our largest program serving children. And so we work across the state to help more eligible families connect with SNAP benefits. We have 2 major programs happening right now. One is statewide, it's the Nutrition Outreach and Education Program, or NOEP, and the other is specifically for Long Island. And again, I just don't want to make any assumptions. Somebody might have a cousin on Long Island who's really interested in helping with SNAP outreach. I'm happy to talk to folks more if you're interested in hearing about that project. But I'm going to focus on our Nutrition Outreach and Education Program, our statewide work. And so in every county on this map that is shaded green, we have a local NOEP coordinator who can provide application assistance and conduct outreach for SNAP. They also do pre-screenings to help folks determine if they might be eligible, and they can work with people throughout the entire application process. So if there's any barriers that come up as they're working with social services, they can help to smooth over those barriers, make sure that people are getting the right amount, those sorts of things. So to find your local NOEP, you can go to foodhelpny.org. We have a mapper. You can find the person who's working in your county. If you're not already connected with them, I would really encourage it. They can be a great resource, even for outreach materials, if you want to have some more localized SNAP outreach resources. In some cases, maybe they'll be able to do some presentations if you're interested for your patrons or for your staff, but just really great SNAP outreach and technical assistance resources at the local level. And the last thing I'll say about SNAP is just to tuck in the back of your mind that there's something called replacement SNAP benefits. So if a family loses food that they bought with SNAP benefit due to an extended power outage or a natural disaster, they may be able to get some of those benefits replaced, but they only have 10 days from the date of the incident to report that loss. And so that's why I'm talking to you about it now, because there will be another extended power outage or natural disaster, right, that affects a particular region. And so I want to make sure that people are seeing this information and know about replacement SNAP benefits ahead of time, so that when you get an email from us in the immediate aftermath of a power outage, that you know what we're talking about and have the resources that you need to help get the word out to families. So we have a whole toolkit all about replacement SNAP benefits that walks people through the process of how to access that, but wanted to just have this on your radar. Again, we would usually put out some type of communication if we know that there's been a widespread power outage, but the turnaround time is just so quick that I want to make sure that people are hearing about this even in maybe more ordinary times. And my last thing here, again, I don't know if y'all are interested or able to advocate, but just in case, even on your personal time, if you're interested, I've got some links to the federal legislative opportunities that are coming up for us, and also a place where you can sign up for our advocacy alerts if that's something you're interested in getting involved with. And for ease of access, when you are hopefully flipping through these slides later, this is just a quick and dirty list of all the URLs for the different programs that we talked about, along with our COVID-19 updates page, where we're keeping track of things like the summer waivers, Pandemic-EBT, and other more timely resources. And that's what I've got for you all today. I see that there's a couple of questions that have come in through the chat box. So if it's all right, Casey, I'll just go ahead and answer those.
Sure.
And then I think, cool. All right, so where can people sign up for P-EBT? So P-EBT is based on eligibility for free or reduced price school meals. So that's really the mechanism to get folks in the door for this. It is only for those kids who qualify for free or reduced price school meals. That might mean that their entire school is serving free meals, like in Poughkeepsie. All of those kids will get the benefits. If that's not the case, then it comes down to, does an individual family fill out that application for getting free or reduced price school meals? And so for the newly eligible families, definitely be encouraging them to sign up for free or reduced price school meals with their school. Can families with limited or no access to the internet get in touch with their NOAP coordinator right now? Yeah, so on our foodhelpny.org page, we have phone numbers as well as email addresses. So you're welcome to share that contact information as well. Any other questions folks have?
So I actually have a couple of questions, but I wanted to hear from Dee Dee. And so I'll encourage anybody who has any questions, pop them in the chat box, or you can hold off on them while we hear from Dee Dee for a minute. I definitely have some questions. This was really helpful, Krista. This, I knew that there was options out there, but I did not know how many options there were out there. So I think this is really helpful to demystify it for me and for hopefully people on the call, so that they can also help their patrons and the people that they work with in the community to help them access these things. So this has been really great to see the kind of layout of all the things that are out there.
Great, I'm so glad that it's helpful, and I'm really excited to hear from Dee Dee.
All right, so Dee Dee, you're up. Would you be able to tell us about some of the work that you have done in your community to address food scarcity? I know you did a lot of things. You were very busy in the past year and still so, I imagine.
Yeah, so there I am. Okay. Just making sure this microphone's working. Well, thank you so much for providing that overview, Krista, because we have been involved with food scarcity issues for the past 2 years. And I have to say there are resources I didn't even know about, and being able to direct people, because once people find out you're involved with food scarcity, you get all sorts of questions on social media, on the website, phone calls. So having resources to point people to and things to put on our website will be incredibly helpful. So we started with addressing food insecurity in summer of 2019. I was very fortunate in that I was approached by the Food Bank of the Hudson Valley. Troy Martin there has been a wonderful partner for us, and he had looked at data and had figured out that that our community in Putnam Valley met the need for free school lunches. So we were able to be a free summer meals program for kids for that summer. Troy, the Food Bank of the Hudson Valley, as the sponsoring organization, took care of most of the administrative paperwork, as you mentioned. He was the one that certified us, submitted the documentation to the New York Department of Education. He came out and trained our staff and volunteers, which was composed of community volunteers and also some board members. It was a really simple training, took less than an hour. All the meals that they provided at that point were shelf stable, so we received deliveries about twice a month. The program ran from the end of June through the end of August, and we received deliveries twice a month. They were all shelf stable items, so they didn't really require any refrigeration. Even the milk was shelf stable. There was certain ways that we had to document things, like marking off how many meals we gave each day. You couldn't do a ton of substitutions because all the kids wanted chocolate milk, and sometimes we didn't have chocolate milk. As mentioned, there was no documentation needed for participating families. It was open to any child ages 18 and younger. They just had to eat the food on the property. We had it 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, from 11:30 to 1:30. And that also coincided with twice a week we had a story time and a baby time. So these meals kind of followed right on the heels of those. So any of the participants that came to the story times were welcome to stay and have a meal. That was a great program, and it really put us on the map in terms of food scarcity issues. There's always issues, especially in this community, because it's right on the Westchester border, but it's also kind of rural. There aren't sidewalks, there isn't public transit. So there's definitely a need for people to get food, but being able to get kids here during the daytime was difficult in some ways, but we were definitely happy to do that program. Troy approached us again in 2020, but prior to the summer, we were closed, as were pretty much everyone else, from mid-March to mid-June. And in April, one of my staff members who's very interested in food scarcity and also was working on a farm part-time came to me and wanted to start a tiny food pantry on outside of our library, because we're lucky enough to have a front porch that is totally covered and it runs the length of the building. So with a small initial investment from the library, she went shopping for shelf-stable canned goods. We put a call out on our social media. We had a library patron that donated a raccoon-proof cabinet, and so we could put pasta and beans and rice, and then we had cans outside on different trucks. A lot of our book trucks were full of canned goods, and then just alerting our community to this. It was really a community-sponsored project that people would bring food by all the time, and we saw incredible use with that. Around that same time, the same employee, she wanted to do garden boxes because we have a garden here. So she wanted to raise food on site and then in the summer harvest that food and offer free fresh produce to community members. So we started doing that as well. And this was around the time when Troy came back to us again, of course, telling us that summer meals for 2020 were going to be very different because of the pandemic. So we couldn't have on-site meals, but what he was able to offer us, because so many things were waived, was a variety of fresh food. So we were lucky in that we were closed on Thursdays. So we made that our day for distributing food from the library. We set everything up in our community room, and we set it up in a safe social distancing way so that we had drop-in hours from 10 to 12. Again, there's no documentation. Anyone facing food scarcity could come, and then we passed out limited supplies of fresh milk, cheese, eggs, and butter. Sometimes, depending what they had at the food bank, we would have frozen meats. And then they could kind of shop the rest of the room for items that they wanted: beans, rice, lentils, packaged meats. We had a ton of fresh produce that the food bank gave us over the course of the season. So, week to week it varied. We had everything from, citrus to apples, to onions, to garlic, to avocados, pineapples, just a huge variety of food available. And we were doing that once a week from, again, July through the start of October of 2020. And that was, again, really a community effort, though led by staff, because it was staff members that were going over to the food bank, which is on the other side of the river in Cornwall and the Hudson, loading up on just about 1,000 pounds of food every week, trucking that back to the library, setting up the community room in a safe way, and then staffing this on on Thursdays when the library was closed to the public to allow people to come in and access this food. And this was a time that we did have a lot of people reaching out to us on Facebook or Instagram and asking, from different towns within our county of how they could get access to the food. There was a couple times we did deliveries because, as Krista mentioned, there were people that were on the SNAP program that they would have, because of power outages, especially in August, they lost food because they lost power. So we were really fortunate that I had a very invested staff and volunteers at the time who wanted to and were able to get the food out to the community, and that with the restrictions that the Food Bank of the Hudson Valley was able to circumvent because of the pandemic, in a lot of ways we were able to reach more people, definitely more families and more children, because it wasn't restricted to just certain days and times, because it wasn't business as usual here. So we don't have our food pantry, our tiny food pantry right now because of the cold weather, but we're planning on bringing that back in May. We've already been in touch with Troy and discussing doing a fresh food distribution here once a month with things that he's able to give to us. And he's also working with different retailers to see about getting gift cards that we'd be able to give to patrons so they could go to the store and redeem them themselves for eggs or milk or butter. So it's really wonderful to get hooked up with a sponsor like the Food Bank of the Hudson Valley and get in the distribution pipeline. And I should say that with our fresh food delivery, whatever we had left over at the end of Thursdays, we would then take to the other food pantry in town, which would distribute food on Saturday mornings. So the food waste was really minimal. We also did a composting program that if there was any rotted vegetables or anything, we composted the food and used it for our garden. So that was what we've been doing for the past 2 years and what we want to continue doing in the future.
Wow, Dee Dee, that is a lot of stuff. I know you had told me about it before, but it's impressive to hear about it again. For the programs for people to get the food, whether it was the pantry or the the community room access to the meals and stuff like that, was there any like turning point or any super effective way that you let people know that was happening? How did people know to come participate in those programs?
Well, this was before our great new electronic sign, but we did have it outside on our old sign. We reached out via social media, our newsletter, the town board meetings, which were all and still are on Zoom. I would participate in, let people know. There were churches in the area that we distributed the information to as well. The other food pantry is run by a church in the area, so they distributed the information as well. And that was pretty much, but we're always trying to find new ways, through the newspapers, through digital calendars online. There was a slight gap in time. We also had linked to the school website because there was a slight period in summer of 2020 where the school lunches had stopped. Like they had grab and go bags through the spring, and then when the school year ended, there was a period of about 2 or 3 weeks where we were able to step in and provide this fresh food because of what Food Bank of the Hudson Valley was able to do for us, because they weren't distributing bagged food yet for the summer. So we linked to what the school had on their website, resources that we were listed there as well. So, but there's never any shortage of ways to get the information out, and we're always looking for better ways to reach people.
All right, cool. So I want to encourage anybody on the line here, if they have any questions, they can pop them in chat. I wanted to ask Dee Dee, I want to ask another question. What was the community's response generally? You said you had some people who were contributing to like some people from the community were contributing to the food pantry that you had set up, the
Yes.
little raccoon-proof thing. In general, what the heck is the library doing with food programs, or what were people happy about it? What was the response generally?
Yeah, no, people were very happy about it. They were kind of unhappy because we had to stop in November. We had to move the food inside because for food safety, it's can't really have canned goods outside in the winter because of freezing and it can make people sick. So we had to do a lot of education about that too. And they're like, when are you going to start it up again? But yeah, really in general, it's like everyone was incredibly supportive. We would, there were just days where we couldn't keep the pantry outside stocked enough. It was like it almost became a staff member's full-time job because it was in an area for a specific reason. It's sort of outside our community room, which is not close to our front door or a side door where people are entering the building. So we tried to give people privacy when they were accessing the pantry, that they didn't have to, feel ashamed or interact, and also for safety with COVID. But yeah, it was everyone from the county sheriff's department. They did a huge food drive and made us the beneficiary of that, to the town board and the Parks and Rec department. So there's no shortage really of the need for these for services and programs. It's just meeting that need. It's an incredible task.
So one of the things that Dee Dee did that I thought was really cool was to address the stigma a little bit by having the programs that were sort of essentially you had story time almost, or early literacy programs that were close to the times that the food pantry were open. And I was wondering, Krista, have you heard of any other ways that organizations have worked to address that kind of stigma around, applying for SNAP or EBT or participating in a summer meals program?
Yeah, I mean, definitely for summer meals, this is one of the reasons why libraries are such a natural fit, because if you're offering a summer reading program and you can offer lunch at the library with your summer reading program, then it's no longer stigmatizing, right? Like, kids are there for the summer reading program. It just happens to include lunch too. We also find that, as much as it brings in new kids for the meal, it also brings in new kids for all the other library services that are provided. That's something that we hear time and time again from libraries, that families who might not have access to summer reading program or other services get their foot in the door through a summer meals program, and then they can learn about everything else that you have to offer. I would say for SNAP, our NOEP program, one of the focus areas for why we have that program is sort of raising awareness and clarifying some of the myths around the program. So, partnering with them can be a great way to just get some messaging that's maybe less stigmatizing, or that addresses some of the misconceptions that folks might have about SNAP. The switch to an EBT card and then an eWIC card for WIC has been tremendous for reducing stigma as well. So again, just sharing that information with folks who might not realize that the cards that they would use to shop with something like WIC look and act very much like a debit card. And so it's much more of a normal shopping experience where the person behind you can't really see what you're paying with. So those types of information can be really helpful for folks.
We had a comment here. It says from Pine Hill, it says, we were working with the summer camp at our community center over the summer on camp days. The kids came over after activities and they had lunch in 2019. That sounds like a good way to address it too. Sort of everybody's welcome, I guess, or piggyback it with another program. I like that idea. Are there any, do you ever have folks who say this isn't an issue in my community? Are those people right ever? Are there communities that really don't have issues with hunger, where they don't need to talk about these resources or share them with the people in their community, or try to have a program where they address this?
Nope, there's always need. And I would say, because of the way that some of these programs are structured, where you need to normally meet an area eligibility requirement in order to participate, in some of those communities where you have a lower percentage of kids qualifying for free or reduced price school meals, it's even harder to reach some of those families with things like summer meals and after school meals. So that makes SNAP and WIC outreach all the more important in those areas, as well as working with the schools to see what they could be doing to reach more kids with the school breakfast and lunch programs, which are some of the biggest and most effective programs providing meals for kids.
We had another issue, or not another issue, another question here from Lois. She asked, does WIC or SNAP limit certain products to be purchased, and specifically spaghetti sauce, I guess? Is there a limit to what you can buy with those things, I guess, a practical limit?
So with SNAP, you can only buy food, and you can't buy, pre-prepared food, right? So you can't take your SNAP benefits to a restaurant and pay for a meal at a restaurant, but you can go to the grocery store and buy the ingredients for the meals that you're going to make yourself. So that's really the primary limitation on SNAP, is just food only. That also goes for Pandemic-EBT. It's the same system as SNAP, so food only. WIC is a little bit different. So part of WIC is the nutrition counseling that families get one-on-one with these public health professionals who can help them identify, what types of food they can add to their diet to meet their nutritional needs, especially during pregnancy or when a woman is breastfeeding and during the early years of a child's life. That's really important. And so for WIC, families basically get a prescription of food items that they can then buy with their WIC benefits. And yes, you can buy spaghetti sauce. I think with all of the programs. I get that was an example, but just in case.
All right.
Okay. Oh, go ahead, Casey.
It's okay. I was just going to see. So we have Nancy is asking, for elders in our community, how can we reach them year round in the snow?
This is a good question. So I used to be a NOAP coordinator in Schoharie County, and I got studded snow tires. And so I was able to help families apply for SNAP, meet them where they were at, right? I can't vouch that every NOAP coordinator has studded snow tires and can do that. But certainly one of the benefits of the NOAP program is that they're more flexible and they're able to get to folks where they're at. A lot of the NOAP coordinators do offer home visits. I would check with them first to see at the local level what services they can provide. But a lot of them do offer home visits, or they can meet people at a more convenient location, like a library community room at a time in the future when it's safe to do so. That's a great way to reach seniors. The other thing I would say is just stay tuned, because we've got some more work happening at our organization that we're gearing up for, specifically focused on SNAP for seniors. So if that's an issue that folks are looking for more, make sure that you sign up for our email list, and we'll keep you up to date on that.
Wow. I wouldn't have thought that the NOAP coordinators would have made house calls, but that's definitely really interesting. One of the other things that we had seen some of our libraries did is they were doing sort of wellness check-in calls, and they were actually using the telephone, believe it or not, to call people, especially sometimes they were identifying older folks in their communities to check up on them. And this was back in April or March or even May, when the COVID was kind of rampant. We didn't know who was out there and what kind of state they were in or what they needed. And so it was sort of taking the reference role that the library has, which some of this is, right? Where can I get a service that will help me with this? And we say, okay, well, we're the library, we can help you with that information. And so that might be a way to reach some elders too, is to, call them up on the phone and say, hey, there's this, this is available to you, and you can access this. So that's one way I could see. And we had a comment also that WIC has really expanded what families can buy in the last 5 years. Another big and awesome change, and families may have misconceptions related to that as well that we can help dispel. I know there were, at some point, sometimes it was tough to find the right size milk or something like that, or cereal or something that you could buy. So it's good to know that it's loosened up and is a little bit more practical for folks.
Yeah, I think the other thing to emphasize too is that there's WIC farmers market benefits. That's another thing that folks might not realize, is that there's able to use their WIC benefits to buy fresh produce, which is fantastic, and also support local farmers and farmers markets.
Okay, so I just want to ask folks if they have any other questions, they can feel free to unmute. We'll take a beat in a minute, or to see if there's any other questions that you're typing into the chat. Otherwise, I do really want to say thank you again to Krista and say thank you to Dee Dee again for coming out today and sharing the work that y'all are doing and y'all have done in the community. And I hope that the folks here on the call are a little bit inspired or have a little bit of more, than they did before we started to be able to help those people in our community who need access to food. We'll be sharing out these slides as Krista said earlier. We recorded the program, and so we'll share out the recording too, and you can feel free to share that with your stakeholders, your staff at your library, your trustees, if they would benefit from this information. And you can feel free to contact me. I think that Dee Dee will probably answer some questions if you need help too, and I know Krista is super helpful too. So thank you everybody for coming out, and thank you again to Krista and Dee Dee.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
Casey. Yeah. Thank you for organizing.
Yes,
Sure.
thank you.